In 2008, I knew the system died, and that's when I became a prepper. Those markets that you see on Wall Street do not reflect the true price of gold and silver. At some point, all assets and all instruments go to their true fundamental value. The winners and losers are definitely chosen, and then the people aren't really paying attention because they're so busy trying to figure out how they are going to feed their families. They are using the corporations that can create a stable coin. Everything is tracked, everything is traced, but they call it stable coin so that you think that it's stable, but it's not. Your choice is between having Amazon dictate everything to you or the central bank dictating everything to you. It is the gateway to surveillance money. We have to get redeemable sound money back in the global monetary system again, or we will always be controlled and they will always inflate our wealth away.
World War III is already happening.
This is a house of cards, and it is in the process of collapsing right now.
You're going to see an economic crash, the likes of which we've never seen.
Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Today I'm joined by longtime friend of the channel, Lynette Zhang, founder and CEO of Zhang Enterprises, an economist and market analyst known for her work on currency, life cycles, sound money, and practical wealth protection. Every time you come on the channel, the price of gold is higher. The last time you were here, I think it was around 3,300. Back in the 3,300 era, right? Now we're looking at 42. We went up to about 44. We corrected. What's going on with you, and what is your perception of these markets? I'm just hoping I can get the high-level analysis of the macroeconomic picture from you today, because you've been calling this for several years, and would strongly encourage people to, before we get going here, make sure you subscribe to Lynette's YouTube channel as well. Let's help get her to 100,000 subscribers, guys.
Yes, thank you. And actually what's really happening in here is that there is a structural shift that started last January in the metals markets. Because in the U.S., those are mostly paper contracts. And so if it's a contract, you can create as much gold and silver as you want to, and the market reads it as if it exists when it never has to exist. But in the European markets, those are more physical, and the rest of the world, frankly, those are more physical markets. So starting last January, there was a repatriation of gold and silver to the U.S. And in other words, and I think this is particularly exciting, I started talking about this then, much of the gold that came over came from the Bank of England. Now, the Bank of England doesn't really have a whole lot of their own gold, but they do store gold for many other countries. Mm-hmm. So, and if you look on the Bank of England's website, you can look at their gold holdings, which are substantially lower today than they were when they shipped out all of that gold. So I'm still waiting for the fireworks when those other countries ask to repatriate, take their gold back. What is going to happen? Because the Bank of England doesn't have it, and neither does the LBMA on both gold and silver. You can go in yourself, you can look at the charts, and you can see that what they have to work with is substantially lower today than it was a year ago. But I'd like people to understand that we are already in process, regardless of what the spot price is right now. Just recently, we had backwardation in both gold and silver. And what that means is that the current spot price to take delivery of physical gold and silver was high, or any gold and silver actually, because it's a contract, was higher than taking delivery in the future. So that shows lack of confidence in the ability to actually get it, which takes me back to what I was talking about with the LBMA and the Bank of England. But what that also means to people that are watching is that we are in the process of shifting. It is not complete yet, but we are in the process of shifting into a physical supply and demand market that will then be dictating the valuations and the prices that you see for both gold and silver. So that's probably in many ways, the single most exciting part for me personally, having been in this industry I came into the gold industry, even though I've been studying it forever, in 2002, because there was a structural shift on what was happening in the currencies then. So now that structural shift is happening in the physical gold and silver markets. And even at 4,200, or at 4,400, or at 10,000, or at 30,000. Quite honestly, that those markets that you see on Wall Street do not reflect the true fundamental value of the price of what the price of gold and silver should be. Those are still substantially higher than here. And I would also say, because I just did a video on this very recently, that nothing, I don't care what market you're looking at, nothing goes straight up, nothing goes straight down. You always have to have bouncing along the way. So at that 4,400, and I think it was $52 or wherever it was on spot silver, those were very, very stretched valuations for the paper markets, not the physical markets, but the paper markets. And when you get that, and stocks are overvalued, cryptos, everything is overvalued, really because of all of the money printing that's going on. Because when they create that money, it has to go someplace. And so when you see this pullback in this correction, and I just talked about it on my live that I do on Tuesdays, all that's happening in that little correction is it's staying inside of a range and giving a chance to come from an overvalued level to an okay level for trading. Then it can take that next leg up. But still extremely bullish on both spot gold and spot silver. I cannot say the same thing for Bitcoin. It was also going through a correction, but its price technically has fallen below a 200-day moving average, which technically is quite bearish, but we have to see what happens.
It's interesting that earlier in the year, when all of that LBMA controversy was unfolding, and it makes sense now, and sometimes we forget because the news cycle is turning over so quickly, but
yeah.
Gold was in the low 3,000s at that point, and here we are now. It all makes perfect sense. So somebody was front running this. Somebody knew what was about to happen. Big players
Absolutely.
knew what was about to happen, because these types of price fluctuations, they can't solely be the result of retail purchases, or can they?
No, and they can't even be what the central banks have been doing, because they really shifted their buying patterns of gold and silver in 2005. And by 2010, they were net positive. And since 2010, they've been buying, it's been elevated up to the highest level of purchases historically ever since they started tracking. And that's been true for the last 4 years or so. And that really didn't make a whole lot of difference in the spot price that we saw. So even though now they're coming in and saying, oh, well, it's all the central bank gold buying, I'm hearing that quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Well, they've been doing that for a while. It is that there has been a mental shift and a true flight to safety asset into physical gold and physical silver. But definitely, to your point, it was being front run, and we saw that back in January.
we see the markets at record highs. I'm looking at the CC. I think it's a CNN. I'm not sure if they're the ones who created this fear greed index, and they determine, if the market's in a state of extreme fear, extreme greed. Right now, the market's in fear, yet the market, by pretty much most metrics out there, is the most overvalued it's ever been. Retail exposure to the markets is the highest it's ever been. So if you're saying that there is a flight to safety, I mean, where's that money coming from, that there's a flight to safety at the same time that we're so exposed and leveraged in the markets?
Well, that is really a great question. And certainly the central banks are one, and who knows more about what they're doing to the currency than they do. But there's also expanding retail buying as well. People are very, very nervous. And, you made a point about these being the most overvalued markets and that they're also getting the highest level of retail participation. And that's absolutely true, because the real money is being made before the retail public comes in. And then, because this is a Ponzi scheme, they need more participation. And that's when they let the retail public in. And those that are in the know, it's all floating up on just all of this easy money. But then at the end of the day, it's risk transfer from the few. So from the few that front run, from the few that really position these markets to the highest level ever, to that naive retail public that, to your earlier point, that news cycle, oh, that happened 10 seconds ago, that's old news. No,
Right.
It's not old news. It all flows one into the other. But that's really why you see the naive public is always the one that, eats it in the shorts, because of all of that risk transfer from those that know what's going on and manipulate what's going on to those that have no clue. They just fear of missing out. But it really is we at Zhang Enterprises, we are just in the physical markets, and I can tell you that this is broad-based, and it's broad-based to the level of age as well, which is what gives me a lot of hope. So there's a lot of younger people that have become so disillusioned, and they're also buying the physical markets. And that's what you need to be doing, because the rest of it's just a lie.
Yeah, and it's safe to say that outside of the United States and certainly Canada, that's probably where a lot of that retail purchasing is happening at this point. Because I'm not sure, I know Costco, it's starting to get a little bit trendy to buy gold bars from Costco, but I don't think that we've really seen that flywheel effect yet here in the North America compared to markets like in India and China. Would you say that's correct, or?
Yes and no, because the fact that Costco or Amazon or Walmart would actually be selling silver and gold bars is an indication of great demand by the retail public. They're not, because they don't know anything about this, nor do they care, nor do they have a buyback policy, nor anything. But if the public wants to buy gold and silver, then they want to sell it to them. So that's actually an indication of the growth of demand. But we don't hear very much about it, because they don't want the public to really realize that there is growing distrust of the current system. But look at this consumer sentiment, right? Look at that. That's a real key. It's something I pay a lot of attention to, because again, this is a Ponzi scheme. So you always have to have new money, and you always have to have confidence. When you lose both of those, the game is over. And I feel like I can't tell you exactly when, but that confidence number keeps testing the all-time lows. And the beauty part of knowing how to read the technical language of the market is it really doesn't matter what I'm looking at. So I could be looking at sentiment. I could be looking at a spot gold chart. I could be looking at a stock chart or a crypto chart. Doesn't matter. Whatever it is that I'm looking at, when you just remove everything and go purely technical, it all works the same. And so I would say that the single most important chart that I pay attention to is that sentiment chart. The public, the consumer, how do they feel?
Right.
Are they confident moving forward? How much more debt can they take on? I mean, okay, maybe they're going to tweak some things so that the consumer can take on more debt, but you still have to service that debt, and that's becoming more and more of a problem. So, okay, now anybody making under $100,000 a year is going to be given a $2,000 check. What is that $2,000 going to do? I mean, all it's going to do is add debt. It's not going to save anybody. And I mean, $2,000, you can go through that in about less than a heartbeat. That's nothing.
Well, I'm going to be conspiratorial and add to what you're saying with respect to the media focus and the lack thereof on gold. It's evident. I mean, when you look at the actual market cap of gold compared to NVIDIA or Palantir or Bitcoin, there is so much attention paid to these markets when they go up. Yet, in order to find information on gold, you really have to go to the financial websites. It's not talked about on the mainstream news. I think it kind of was for a bit when it went over 4,000, but it was very brief. And they were more gung-ho about it correcting and then kind of scaring people out of the markets, which is the vibe that I kind of got. So clearly, you know, there's a concerted effort to suppress and to try to, you know, relieve demand so that the bigwigs can get it at a lower price. At least that's what it really starts to look like. Because if you look at, I don't know, the market cap of gold has, what is it, like 30 trillion now? I don't even know what it is. But
I don't even know what it is.
right. So, I mean, these are huge numbers that should command the attention of most people. But for whatever reason, they're really not trying to draw attention to this, which makes me think that, you know, they're saying, look, I gotta use my gun, right? they're saying, hey, here's $2,000 stimulus check for people who are making under 100 grand a year, because we know you're going to spend it, and we know this is going to be effectively a stimulus, even though we're $1.8 trillion deficit. But they're saying, oh, it's because of tariffs, but the tariff revenue, based on the numbers that I've looked at, doesn't even cover the stimulus checks. Well, they're not calling it that. I don't know what they're calling it, but that's basically what it is. So it's crazy that they're going to get away with it too, as a tariff dividend. And how is he going to pay down the national debt when you're still $1.6 trillion in a deficit? I mean, is anybody asking these questions, or is this just, you know, bizarro, you know, bread and circus, Rome is burning type thing?
Well, you know, quite honestly, when you know that you're going to declare bankruptcy and they send you a credit card, what do? You spend it. And very quietly, I just saw this yesterday. Okay, I think, this is pretty interesting. Here it is. More tax breaks for the wealthy. IRS quietly retracting limits on loopholes. And so basically what they're saying, the Treasury Department and the IRS, through a series of new notices and proposed regulations, are giving breaks to giant private equity firms, crypto companies, foreign real estate investors, insurance providers, and a variety of multinational corporations. So that should add roughly $4 trillion. No, that's on top of the recent $4 trillion in tax breaks that were already given to all of these multinationals. And, you know, this is real. At the same time, U.S. tells states to undo moves on food stamps. I mean, you know, the winners and losers are definitely chosen, and then the people aren't really paying attention, right? Because they're so busy trying to figure out how they are going to feed their families.
Right.
That's what makes what you do and me as a prepper, what we do, so critically important, because at least I can't speak for Canada, but I can speak for the U.S. We've been been kind of guided into going to the grocery store.
Yep. Oh,
But we all know what happens during COVID when those shelves went barren. And guess what? That whole supply chain hasn't been fixed yet.
it just seems as though people will gladly accept, like nobody's going to turn down $2,000. And I don't blame them, quite frankly. The problem is they don't realize that that's just going to lead to inflation. And the people who've already kind of front ran everything are going to get the hard assets first. And so it's really just kicking the can down the road. I mean, we were about to buy a new car the other day, and no dealership will take cash. Like they do not want cash. If you just want to go and buy a car, the amount of hoops you have to jump through and the games you have to play, because it's all built on this, no, we got to get you on the interest because we need to make more money for the car. So it's I don't know, just a self-perpetuating cycle of debt and implosion, and it's going to end in disaster. And I presume that this stimulus check, I personally think it's the beginning of UBI, but I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I totally agree with that. And MMT, modern money theory, because the consumer, the report just came out that the level of delinquencies in the U.S. on car loans is at the highest level.
Right.
Okay. So, and it's all about negative equity. So if you're having to borrow to buy the car, well, you have these really long car loans. So then when you go to get a new car, whatever is left from that old loan gets rolled into the new loan. I mean, do you see the insanity of this?
Well, 50-year mortgages. What are your thoughts on 50-year mortgages? I mean, isn't that insane?
It is insane because that is really just about making the payment low enough so that people can qualify to take on even more debt, right?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. So I have to look at that and see, is that a fixed rate? But I think there's a balloon payment that comes in here at some point. I mean, and it's not even... It is kicking the can down the road, and people think that they can kick the can down the road forever, but they're only going to kick the can down the road until it benefits them to stop. And I do believe that I could be wrong about this. This is purely my opinion, and time's going to tell if I'm right or if I'm wrong, but I feel it from the tip of my head to the bottom of my feet, that when President Trump recently signed the Genius Act, legalizing stable coins to create a new artificial market for dollars and dollar debt, that like they've done in the past, they are using the corporations, again, like Amazon, like Walmart, like any corporation that can create a stable coin on a one-to-one basis to dollars. Then that company has to turn around and buy treasury debt. So you see, creating that new artificial market like the petrodollar did. But I believe that that is the tool that they will use, that is being used to usher in the hyperinflation. Because right now it's about $125 billion market cap, and they're looking at it being something like 2 or 3 trillion within a couple of years. And it's interesting because if you and I are going into that ecosystem, we basically will use dollars to buy those stable coins that then will turn around and be backed by dollars and that dollar denominated debt. It doesn't really make any sense at all, but it is a shell game. And we're also going into it's much more fractured, because you can have Walmart issue them, you can have Amazon issue them, you can have a state issue them, or another country, and they don't have to be dollar backed. You know, in China, they're not going to use the dollar to back their stable coins. They're going to use the yuan.
Can we just back up a little bit for people? Because my audience might not be aware of like what a stable coin is. Can you just explain that to us like we're 5 years old? What?
I'll do my best.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll do my best. CBDCs, central bank digital dollars or digital currencies, have been a big no-no here in the US. So what a stable coin is it is a programmable cryptocurrency that that is backed mostly by dollars. And it's used quite extensively in third world countries, particularly Africa. So what it actually does is bypass any kind of regulations or a banking intermediary. And the reality is, since it is backed in this country and in most other places at this point by dollars, whatever happens to the dollar also happens to the stable coin. But they call it stable coin so that you think that, number one, that it's a coin, that it exists somewhere, and that it's stable, but it's not. And anybody can issue them. I mean, I think I could issue them if I wanted to. Anybody can issue them as long as they go in and they buy treasuries and back it on a one-to-one basis with dollars. But what it really is, it is the gateway to surveillance money because it is programmable money. And you have to be not just an engineer, but a very specific kind of engineer that has the ability to go in and read the code, which means that everything is tracked, everything is traced, and they can dictate what you can do when they want to. They're not going to do that to begin with, and there's going to be all sorts of incentives to get you in there. But quite honestly, your choice is between having Amazon dictate everything to you and the central bank dictating everything to you. Take your pick. It is really just a backdoor way of getting you involved in programmable money. And I'm already seeing it.
Let me just try to make sense of this then. So
Please.
Amazon's gonna have like Amazon bucks or something, and
Yep.
you'll be able to buy
Amazon
stuff
stablecoin.
in certain places outside of
Yep.
Amazon.
I don't know that it'll be usable outside of Amazon, but it will be usable inside of their ecosystem. And so it kind of locks you in, because just like credit cards have created these loyalty programs, so you're going to want to use their credit card.
Yeah.
The same thing is happening with stable coins. And I also find it really interesting that, say, JP Morgan Chase, as a great example, was talking about how awful all of this is. And they could not comply with the rules and regulations from the financial crisis and the Dodd-Frank Act that was legalized in 2010. But as soon as the Stablecoin Act was signed, they brought their own out. They were all ready for that. They're not ready for something that was enacted in 2010. They need more time on that. But the stable coins, boy, they were ready, and now it's a good thing. Although there is a battle that's going on between the banks and the fintechs, financial technology companies. So that's kind of interesting too. But yeah, that's why I said it's fractured, because I don't think you're going to be able to use the Amazon stablecoin anywhere else. So you're going to have a whole bunch of different stable coins. That's a recipe for disaster.
Interesting. Going back to the 50-year mortgage, it seems like an insidious way of moving people towards like a subscription type system. Like everything's subscription, everything's on the cloud, everything's leased. And we're starting to approximate that whole ethos of the WEF, which is, you'll own nothing and be happy. It really does seem like a 50-year mortgage. I mean, you don't own anything if it's 50 years. I mean, if it goes beyond that, I seen a meme today, and it was the Pepe Frog guy, and he was looking at a news article about how the Chinese were going to do life extension to 150 years old, and that will pave the way for 100-year mortgages. So it's really sad. Going back to your point about sorry, do you have something to add there?
But can I just kind of add on to that? Because I've done a really interesting thing, which is compare in the Federal Reserve, the FRED, F-R-E-D, the Federal Reserve Education Department. If you made a comparison between the interest rates over 40 years and the price of houses over 40 years, the lower the interest rate, the more expensive house that you can afford, right? So what this really does, and why are the housing prices going up the same? I mean, in 1978 or 79 is when I bought my first house, and it was $59,000. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath starter home, about 1,800 square feet. Well, today that same house is probably somewhere around $500,000. The house is the same house. What changed? The value of this stuff because of all of this. So that's really what that 50-year mortgage is about, because people cannot afford the mortgages, right? They can't afford the houses. And yet, so they need to make those mortgages cheap enough so they can continue to inflate the prices. Because somebody might look at that and go, but look at that. Isn't that good? Your house is worth, you bought it for $59,000. Now it's worth $500,000. Isn't that good? No, it's not good. That is not an indication of my house being worth that much more money. It performs the same exact function. It is really a recognition of the loss of value until we have no value. I mean, that same period of time, if you were making $100,000 a year, I'm telling you, you were rich.
Oh, yeah.
My husband at that time, I think he was making $58,000 a year, and he's an electrical engineer. And he worked for the power company. And so, I mean, we were okay. We were fine and we weren't rolling in it, but I could afford pretty much whatever I wanted. It was reasonable income back then. If you're making 58, and I did work mostly, but not all the time. And I did it because I wanted to do it, not because I had to do it. Today, you have to do it. You need two. The average wage is $68,000, and they stimulated the last time anybody making less than, I think it was $150,000, and this time they're saying anybody that makes less than $100,000. That is a reflection of the loss of value, and there's virtually officially no purchasing power left. That's why that confidence is everything. Because once the public loses confidence in the dollars, whether they're Canadian dollars, US dollars, or Chinese yuan or anything, as soon as the public loses confidence in that currency and in those that are leading us, it's game over. The Ponzi scheme is done. We are in hyperinflation. Everything is put in place, I believe, with the stable coins, everything is put in place to generate that hyperinflation, just like they did in 1914 when they used corporate debt to convert into Federal Reserve notes. And Federal Reserve is not part of the government. So all of us work for corporate debt. Why is that okay? That's what they can inflate away. Sound money is sound money because governments and central banks cannot inflate it away. Well, why can't they inflate it away? Because they're both used in single sector of the global economy. So there's such a broad base of demand that it overwhelms their ability to inflate it away. But this stuff is used in one place. So when the demand goes away, they go away. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's just paper. And so you have a very similar philosophy. When I look at the price of gold and the price of silver, I don't really get too excited about it either way, because I know its whole purpose is to just maintain its value. It's not to get rich.
Right.
It's not a get rich quick scheme. It's for the purpose of retaining the hard-earned value of the purchasing power or whatever that you've accrued throughout your lifetime. So despite the fact that I don't hold a lot of this stuff, I still understand why people should do it. And honestly, I'm looking into potentially trying to allocate a bit more of my resources to gold and silver in the future.
Well, that's why, when I became a prepper, so this was after 2008, I knew the system died, and that's when I became a prepper. And so I agree with you because I am like all in, but it's food, water, energy, security, barterability, which for me is primarily silver, but any talent you have, anything physical that you have, toilet paper, it's barterable. Wealth preservation, which for me is primarily gold, but community falls into that. Speaking of community, it's local community because I've had all these years to prepare, and yet we don't have that much time left. I can't tell you exactly when, but local community can sustain a reasonable standard of living. And I would argue that community could be the single most important thing that you and I ever talk about, because we have to, there's power in numbers. Mm-hmm. And then that takes us to the next one, which is global community, because we have to get redeemable sound money back in the global monetary system again, or we will always be controlled and they will always inflate our wealth away. We have to take our power back. And the only way that we can do that is if there is redeemable gold in the monetary system, say 40%. And so if you're looking at it as a public, right? You're looking at it, you don't like what you see the government doing or the central banks doing. You have the ability to pull that gold out of the system and force fiscal responsibility. Because I don't see any fiscal responsibility from anybody that's in power. I see greed.
I mean,
and I see risk transfer.
It's rampant, from the Trump coin thing to this $2,000 Ponzi scheme, whatever it is they're going to cook up here. And just some numbers that confirm the consumer sentiments that you were talking about. So in the month of October, apparently we don't have all the numbers because of the government shutdown, but there was an additional 50,000 jobs lost, and 71% of consumers believe that unemployment will go up in the next 12 months, which apparently is the highest in 45 years. There's also an elephant in the room here with automation. Do you believe that that is also going to factor into the coming debt explosion?
Wow, I see not just the automation, but the AI and the direction that they're taking us with, and especially with people that are so dependent upon this because people are inherently lazy. And so I just read an article yesterday on brain rot.
Right.
I think the unemployment will definitely go up. We have to shift. It's so important to learn skills and to learn skills that cannot be duplicated through AI. Plumbers, electrician, people that actually have to do the physical work, because much as they want to drive us into that netherland where, we see things or what have you, we still live in a physical world. So people need to learn a lot of those skills like you do to grow your own food and make your own repairs and dig your own. These are important skill sets that can't be AI'd away. We're shifting into a new system. Do you want to have a say in that system? Or are you just going to roll over and say, well, there's nothing I can do about it, so, oh well, it's every man for himself? I so disagree with that. There is power in numbers. And The Revolutionary War was brought on by 3% of the population, not 100%, not 50%, 3%. And so who is dictating this? It's the 1%. So I believe that if we can get 3% of the population to create a quiet revolution by converting their garbage fiat money, government debt-based money that they're inflating away into sound money, we can demand a seat at the table because 3% is bigger than 1%.
Exactly. You look at the Buffett cash pile right now. I believe he owns 5.6% of U.S. treasuries. And conversely, we have retail record exposure to the markets. So if you look at the two charts of Buffett's cash pile, and I'll get the editor to put it on the screen, versus retail exposure to the markets, it's a perfect match. And I mean, that tells you pretty much everything you need to know. And he's about to retire in January, I believe. So I think there's going to be some interesting synchronicity and poetry with that. I suspect that right around the time that he retires, and this is just a off the cuff prediction, that something is going to happen. They're going to wait till he's out. Okay, they're going to be like, all right, he's out, let's crash it or something. I just feel as though there's something about that he is in record amounts of cash right now, just waiting patiently for this irrational exuberance to end, and it just will not end. He's been forced to retire. Isn't that crazy?
Well, it is. And I would also add, for anybody that wants to, Warren Buffett's father was a politician who fought for and believed strongly in redeemable gold in the monetary system. So even though that's not something that Warren shills, my bet, I know how he was brought up. Yeah. My bet is he's got a lot of gold that he does not talk about.
Yeah, because
I could be wrong. I don't know.
He's always been outspoken about how gold is, something about you pay to put it, you take it out of the ground and then you pay to put it back in the ground. But I do agree that there must be, especially among the elites. I mean, if I'm an elite and I have hundreds of billions of dollars, I'm certainly allocating a significant portion of that. And now you have the banks talking about 20% allocation, which was another story that was downplayed, or at least not given nearly enough attention in the media. So if the banks are projecting 5K gold by the end of 2026 and 20% exposure, I think it's a no-brainer at this point. Like, do you think we've bottomed in the gold markets and silver markets, or could it go down? Could it correct further before it goes back up? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, for one thing, I know that people are used to referring to what Wall Street is putting out as the gold and silver markets. They're not really, they're the spot gold and spot silver. So we need to get used to referring to them for what they really are, which is just a contract. Looking at them technically, they are still a bit overbought. So I would imagine that they could stay inside of a trading range, giving those moving averages a chance to catch up. But I can tell you for 100% absolute fact, without any doubt in my mind, that the true value of 1 ounce of gold at this moment and 1 ounce of silver is somewhere north of $33,000, $40,000 an ounce. So at $4,000, $5,000, $10,000, $30,000, undervalued. Because at the end of the day, when they need to regain public confidence, so what happens 100% of the time, and there's over 4,800 examples, they take something like this that has zero intrinsic value, and they revalue gold in terms of this, and that's when it starts to move toward its fundamental value. Now, I'll say $40,000 today, and then people kind of marry that number, but I don't want you to marry that number, because the more of this that they do, the higher that number goes. But 10 trillion times zero is zero. So If this goes to $3 trillion an ounce, right? You're not going to want to convert it back into dollars unless you're going to then turn around and convert it in immediately into another income producing asset or hard asset, like more land or businesses or things that will generate money.
Well, I think you make excellent points, and we could talk a bit more about what people can do to kind of prepare for the coming crash or whatever it's going to be. Maybe it's going to be a crash upwards, maybe not downwards. But what are your thoughts on Trump's sort of subtle nods to gold, because he's got the White House adorned with all kinds of gold ornaments and stuff. Now, there was a reporter in there the other day, and there's talking about Fort Knox and the gold cards, and there's all these weird references to gold. I think they even put a gold statue of him in front of the Capitol Hill, but I think that was maybe related to a cryptocurrency. There seems to be these sort of subtle hints that maybe they're about to do something in that respect, that you were talking about, gold revaluation. Do you think that's a real possibility? Because I've seen the idea shot down by certain economists who say, well, it will never happen for a variety of reasons. I mean, one of the reasons I can think of is, India has a lot of gold, and so does China, presumably, even in the hands of the consumer populations there. So if they revalue gold, then those countries correspondingly get a lot richer as well.
Right. Well, I know that President Trump is a believer of gold, and I know that he has accepted gold in payment for leases and such. So, and everybody should be aware that every single government has a gold revaluation account. So that is always used. Gold is always used after all public confidence is lost, and they need to regain that confidence. I can sit here and I can tell you, and I can't give you a lot of guarantees, but I'll give you this one. At some point, all assets and all instruments go to their true fundamental value. So yes, my friend, there will be a gold revaluation. It will not happen until they have hyperinflated away all of this debt. People think, well, they'll just do that and that'll be hunky-dory. No, because as soon as you make gold a component of the monetary system, it creates fiscal responsibility and it fixes the debt where it is, which is not payable. So since we officially have 3 cents left worth of purchasing power in the US dollar, what will happen is that confidence piece, when that confidence falls to the lowest level ever, that will be, and the stable coins are in place, and they pretty much are right now. I mean, there might be a little bit of window dressing, but they're in place. That's when we will have that hyperinflation, and to your earlier point, melt up, right? There's melt down and then there's melt up. And there's only one way, if the markets continue to be unstable, there's only one way, that's deflationary, and only one way to fight deflation, and that's with inflation. And so I expect to see a whole lot more of this to finish that off, repay that debt with wherever you are in the world, whatever that government currency is in the world, to repay that debt with that currency that has zero value. And after that, that's when you get the revaluation. Globally, on average, that happens 3 times historically. I can't tell you how many times it's going to happen now. I can tell you Zimbabwe and Venezuela are on their 6th iteration. But what I can tell you is it will happen, because all of these things that with the tariffs and this $2,000, et cetera, this is all inflationary. And the Federal Reserve, the central banks, are easing into an already easy money environment. That's dangerous. That is so dangerous. So if we get a nice little tick up in obvious inflation, that could be enough to trigger that final loss of confidence and the ensuing hyperinflation, and then the overnight gold revaluations, which will probably happen about, I don't know. It could happen once, but that's probably not likely. I would say at least 3 times, because there's an awful lot of debt that they have to work out. So that's why what you do and why I became a prepper, because I think it should be obvious to everybody, food is the single biggest issue for people. And look at what's happening with food around the world. There's an awful lot of starvation that's going on. So that's why that whole mantra, because you can't live without food or water. You can live without gold or silver if you're in with a really good community that's providing all of these necessities that you need. And that's what I see. So there's not one doubt about the revaluation. Every central bank has one. Every country has a gold revaluation account. They just can't do it till they hyperinflate away the debt.
And there's definitely going to be, if the U.S. reevaluates gold, maybe you can give us an estimate on what price you think it will be revalued at. But that's going to have geopolitical ramifications, massive, I presume, in terms of global tensions and lines of conflict that exist right now. I just wanted to make a point with respect to, you're talking about self-sustainability and how that has value. And it seems as though the current supply chain as it stands and this whole debt-based economy that we've created to encourage people to be self-reliant would actually accelerate the crash of this current paradigm. Because if you can get get yourself 24 chickens, live off the eggs and the potatoes in the ground and the fruit trees, you don't have to go into debt anymore for that one thing. If you could learn how to repair stuff and you don't need to just buy something new and buy into the planned obsolescence model, then you're not going to be partaking in the whole debt bubble, and thus
exactly
the risk of it crashing. So we're in a situation where the government and multinationals, whatever, can't encourage people to do these things that they need to do to prepare for the inevitable crash, because it would bring about the crash even quicker. So it's a very dangerous, paradoxical situation where they have to continuously encourage people to be more dependent on the system and not less. This is why they're encouraging Bitcoin instead of gold, because they want you to remain in on the ledger. And you've always, I think you were the first person who brought it to my attention that you thought Bitcoin was created potentially by them to take attention away from gold, because fundamentally, growing food and gold and silver are things that are antithetical to the current system, which is destined for failure. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that you are absolutely spot on. And, I'll tell you something that has been really interesting to me. I've done the XRP show in Vegas 2 times. And the first time that I did it, I did it because a lot of people that moved into that arena are like-minded. They're trying to go outside of the system. And isn't that how it was sold? That this is completely outside of the system because nobody ever read the 1996 NSA, which is a government agency white paper on how to create a mint, which is the blueprint that they followed. I don't think it was a coincidence that Bitcoin came out in January of 2009. And then we had quantitative easing, which is just free money printing, that came out in March because they need to get adoption. So there's absolutely zero doubt in my mind, but that Bitcoin was used as a Trojan horse. And how do they get you to participate? They let it rise right? They get it out there. They make sure it's really visible so that people want to participate in it. So the first year that I did the show, it was, people, I mean, we were swamped, lots of like-minded people, etc. Last year when I did the show, it was like they were very cult-like. Like, if you don't think the way I think, then I hate your guts, you're stupid, you don't know anything, and the ears are closed. I do a live every Tuesday from like noon to 2:30 Arizona time. And this is a community. In a community, all voices get heard. A cult, there's only one voice allowed. A community, it's every voice is allowed. And I invite people that know more about cryptocurrencies than I do, come in and share your knowledge base and tell me how this image of Bitcoin is outside of the system. Because it sure looks like it's dead in the middle of the system to me. It's not private. It can easily be hacked. There can be all sorts of backdoors. It's a way to they can make the purchasing power theft small enough that it's happening, but you don't notice it. That's what that 2% target is about, the inflation target. 2% is low enough that you don't change behavior. That's what they deem price stability. So I am not an advocate. I do not own any Bitcoin because ethically I cannot support their lie, and I cannot support people being entrapped in it. And I know that's what it is. I've lived through those changes. I lived through when they took silver out of the money, and I lived when Nixon took us off the gold standard. And I've studied currency life cycles since 1987, and I've read their documentation where they will say, we know how to do this. And I don't know if I've done this with you or not, but it's actually pretty interesting. Bear with me here for 1 second, and let me kind of show you how they did it to get us off of the gold standard. Because first there was this, right? A 1 ounce gold coin. Oh my goodness, how heavy is this? It's got a $20 face value on it. So because it's so heavy and inconvenient to carry that around, they came out with this. This is a gold certificate. You can see the little gold mark here and, $20 face value, same as this. And you could walk into the bank with this, walk out with this. So it's fully redeemable. It's just the same thing. But at the same time, 1914, they came out with these Federal Reserve notes. Can you see how much this looks like this? And that was 1914. So we had roughly almost 20 years where we were all using all three of these interchangeably at the same stated face value, $20. So in 1933, when they took those away, well, we still had this. And so this was taught, we were taught is the same as this, which is the same as this. It's not.
So what changed is that you could no longer take that $20 fiat note like you could with the promissory note into a bank and they would give you gold. You had to go and buy gold from a gold broker at that point with that.
You couldn't even do that unless you bought the pre-33s. And the way that was sold to the public was that it was illegal. Well, it was illegal to hold more than 5 ounces of gold, though if you read it, you could hold it pre-33 form. So yes, you would have to. And that my uncle was a major antique dealer back east. So he had 2 safes full of the only way that you could legally hold more than 5 ounces. Jewelry is another way too, because it's classified as a collectible.
Okay. And there's no limits on how much gold you can hold today.
Correct.
But
at the moment, correct.
At the moment.
But why do you think, and I was just reading a recent Federal Reserve report, and on the front of the report, they had a dollar inside of a gold coin because they want you to think of the dollar as good as gold, and they want you to think about cryptocurrencies to be as good as gold, but none of them are. This uses energy and it uses it up. And I have a huge concern with all these data centers that are being built. There's not enough energy. The grids, and especially in the US, are super old, and there's not enough water for these guys' usage. And they have more money than countries have. So what do you think is going to happen to the general public? And there's already places in Arizona where they've drained the water out of the underlying aquifer, and the people in those towns have to buy bottled water because there's not enough water to go around, right? That same thing is going to happen with energy. This also takes energy to pull out of the ground, but gold is indestructible. So in any form at all, gold and silver is monetary at its base, and this energy can be used over and over and over an infinite number of times. This gets used once, done. This is infinite, which is another reason why it's your bazooka.
Yeah, to play the the devil's advocate, we've had some crypto guys on the channel before. One of the use cases for it that I've heard that kind of makes sense is if you're moving money across borders. So
Yep.
if you need to, jump ship before shit hits the fan in Venezuela or, wherever, that it's easier than trying to custody gold across a border. It's less hassle. You don't have to draw attention to yourself. So in that respect, I've heard the phrase, Bitcoin is for flight and gold is for war, to quote Clem Chambers. But generally speaking, I do agree with you that gold seems to be the safe haven if you're planning on laying anchor. So what types of gold do you recommend to a person who's getting into this, or silver for that matter? Are we looking at
Both.
numismatics? Are we looking at bullion? Are we looking at jewelry? What are your thoughts on where
Well,
to
it
allocate?
really depends on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And by the way, when I travel, now look, I'm not taking huge boxes, right? But when I travel, I mean, I can have a coin like this that's worth $8 million. So I can keep this in my pocket, and I've never had anybody question me, because it's not like TSA or anybody at the airport even understands gold and silver. And I have just not had that issue. And you can also do it with jewelry. So the way that we work, I've developed a strategy, a sound money strategy that's built in layers. And the first thing we have to do is define what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And then it's the right tool for the job. So it could be some level of bullion, and then you want to make sure you're diversified, because bullion is classified as monetary metal and could be, if they were to do an overt confiscation, which has happened 3 times in the US. So that, to me, is clear historic precedent.
When did they do that? What were the dates that they did that?
Oh, they did that. The War of 1812, the Revolutionary War, and again in 1933. So those are the 3 times.
Okay.
Or not the Revolutionary War. Was the war between the states? Oh my God, I can't. The Civil War.
Huh.
And I actually even have, a Confederate note right there.
Wow.
Which I can't buy anything with. And I'll tell you, I do not pay a lot of money for any of this stuff, any of these samples. So yeah, those were the 3 times historically when the U.S. has actually confiscated gold. And it's pretty typical to use war as a judgment to create that hyperinflation, right?
And so you're
'Cause I
saying
can't
that
buy anything.
they confiscate the bullion and not the tokens?
Correct. It's monetary gold. that would be confiscated. And an easy way in the US to determine what's what, you just look at the IRS, what can I hold inside of an IRA? If I can hold it inside of an IRA, then it's classified as monetary gold. So I don't personally buy that, though there could be reasons why you would. Okay, there could be reasons why you would. Oh, excuse me. But it's a combination of gold and silver. So the first thing we do is establish what your goals are. You want silver for barterability. I personally will have silver in any form, including sterling silver or 925 silver, which is 92.5% pure. And then it's a variety of the kinds of gold. Like this is just a raw gold coin. It's just an ounce of gold. It is pre-33, so it gives me potentially a level of protection. But this is my emergency gold. So the strategy looks at short term. Oh, I need cash right this second. This is what I'm going to liquidate. It also looks at whatever your fixed rate debt is so that you can, boom, pay that off when they do those overnight resets. And it also, so that's kind of intermediate term. And then longer term, you want to have the ability to take advantage of the opportunities, because as this debt bubble is imploding, and it's already burst, we don't have time to talk about that now, but we want to have our purchasing power intact to convert into those other income producing opportunities when they are undervalued. So it's layers, and it's based upon what it is that you are trying to accomplish. That's what we put first.
In terms of capital gains, I know it's on a country by country basis, but is there any difference, I guess, just for our American viewers, in terms of the types of gold and the resale value and the capital gains tax paid on jewelry versus the coins versus bullion?
Well, that also depends, because they want to keep us away from gold. But as more and more states are legalizing gold and silver as legal tender, and therefore removing that taxable event. And I sit on the board of the Global Sound Money Movement, Citizens for Sound Money. So right now, the federal government heavily taxes it because they want to keep you away from it. Right? Now, there's different reportability between different things as well, but all good citizens always pay all the taxes that are due. However, when I saw the federal government change the laws around cannabis because so many states had adopted it, that gave me a lot of inspiration and hope. So yeah, I mean, they have the inflation tax to inflate away the value of this stuff, and then they have a direct tax to get you not to want to buy this. However, even at 28% or the highest level of tax that they do on this, that's still better than 100%. And right now on this, officially they've taxed it away 97%.
Okay, interesting, very interesting.
And I will say this as well, because the strategy is designed in a full circle loop. So if you're using your barterable, you're using that up. And there's even cash in there that we know is going to zero, but you're using that up. Any of the costs, the fees, the taxes, et cetera, then part of the strategy offsets those so that by the time we come to the very end of this particular strategy, you are whole, even if you've spent your barterable money, even if you've had to pay the taxes on it, even if there have been some penalties for something else that you needed to do to build your position. Because the key is when they're planning things like the IRAs or the 401ks or the money market fees and gates and blah, 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 they spend most of their time in discussing, well, how much do we have to charge them so that people don't pull it out? Right? You read their stuff, they talk about that all the time. because people they'll look at an IRA and they'll go, well, I don't want to pay the taxes. You're going to pay the taxes. At some point, you will pay those taxes, and you aren't going to know what those are going to be until you get there, because they can change all of those laws. So better to be more proactive and make sure that you understand what you're doing and you have a strategy. Don't just sit there and allow things to happen.
Just a couple last questions for you. In terms of your predictions for where things are going, be it inflation, bank failures, real estate, bubble popping, market crash, what do you think we can expect in the next year? Are you bullish? Are you bearish? Do you think they can continue to blow the bubble up a little bit more? Or where do you think all this is going in 2026?
Well, 2026, I see this as melt up. Really, gold and silver are undervalued, stocks, real estate, all of that isn't. So they're trying to keep that floating because that's what people look at. So I would imagine that we're going into the melt up phase. I know the stock markets have been a bit wonky, and so have the crypto markets. They're in bear market territory. But I think there's going to be a whole lot more money creation to get people involved in the stablecoin market, particularly, and the shopping. So I think that it's modern money theory. I think we're going into melt up. And but that's not good, because what that does is it destroys whatever little bit of purchasing power and whatever little bit of confidence is yet in the market. But I do see that in 2026. Yes, I see much higher prices in both spot gold and spot silver. I don't see it going to their fundamental value yet, but I think probably 5,000 from where we are here on spot gold is probably low. And, now that silver has broken out of a huge double cup cycle, or triple cup actually, cycle, to see spot silver really at $100 from here by the end of next year would not be shocking to me.
What about the banks? Do you think they're going to hold up, or is there going to be some, more bank runs and failures in the future?
Boy, they're doing their best to prevent those bank runs and failures because they are zombies. But there is also that battle that's going on between financial technology companies that are wanting to be more bank-like, and the banks that are wanting to hold on to their monopoly. So I do think that you're going to see a whole lot more bank failures. The runs on the bank. I mean, every time that started, you had the central banks trotting out saying, we'll just make more money, so there doesn't have to be a run on the banks. But the banks are showing a lot of distress, and I think it would not surprise me to see a bail-in this year, because they've been testing that over the last couple of years. And in 2024, there actually was a bail-in of uninsured deposits, and nobody made a big, huge squawk about it. So I would imagine that'll be tested in 2026.
What about the impact of this government shutdown? Do you think that could potentially throw a wrench into things? Is that a black swan in January if they resolve it this go around? How does that factor in here to U.S. currency?
We have not felt the full ramifications of the current shutdown, and I think we could certainly see another shutdown going into January, but it's not so easy. We're flying blind. We're not getting any good data, right? And it isn't just because of the recent job cuts. This really started last year. So I don't know. It's like having your foot on the accelerator in a car with being blindfolded. I don't know. You think there could be an accident? That's why you got to have the gold.
Okay, I just have one last question for you. One metric that you check every morning that some people ignore. Like, when you first open your computer in the morning, what's the first thing you check, aside the price of gold and silver?
I actually don't check the price of gold and silver because I know that it's a lie, but I do check consumer confidence. I check those confidence numbers because that's everything.
Perfect. All right, guys. Well, I want to thank you for coming out today. My my fun gun stopped working, but there we go.
There you go.
Let's keep the printers, keep hedging our bets against the money printing. And guys, go check out Zhang Enterprises YouTube channel. They're going to be doing some big stuff soon and building out a big studio. I'm looking forward to that. So I just want to commend you on having more of a presence on YouTube because your videos are very informative. We've barely scratched the surface of what you know about this stuff today. So I want to thank you for coming out. And the next time we meet, maybe we'll be at 5,000 gold. I have a sneaking suspicion we'll be getting close to that. So
I do too, and it's been great, and I really appreciate you inviting me. And I think we have to do something in person.
absolutely, we gotta get on the homestead and do some stuff out there. And that's one of the things that I do. I've told you this before, but I think that's a testament to the integrity of what you're trying to do. Is that you're not only preaching buy gold, buy silver. You're talking about the things that have real material value. And that extends so far beyond just precious metals. You're a prepper, and that's what my audience loves about you. So, we'll definitely make that happen. I'll make my way down to Phoenix, probably not in summer, maybe over the winter. We'll see, because, I can't stand that heat. So,
Yeah. Well, that would be good. And I'll bring you on to both my farms.
that would be perfect. All right. You can blindfold me, put me in a van, whatever you need to do. If you're
Okay.
a real prepper, then that's what you got to do, right?
I don't know. I'm kind of a generous
Oh yeah,
prepper.
you're one of those community people. Okay, perfect.
Yes, I am. I'm one of those darn community people.
Hey.
Yep, I am. I am a community prepper.
That's what we need. That's what we need. Thanks a lot, Lynette.
Thank you.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.